Welcome to Spoilerin Time, the companion series to Cordkillers. On Cordkillers, we tell you how to get the gear and the services and the things to watch. On Spoilerin Time, we watched them. So now we spoil them. We're going to spoil Justified, Episode 9, Season 2, Game of Thrones, Episode 8, Season 6, Preacher, Episodes 3 and 2, depending on how you number them, Voltron, Legendary Defender, Episode 1, and the movie Warcraft. But I'm Tom Merritt, and you're Brian Brushwood.
Yeah, and mainly, I'm much more interested to introduce our not one, but two co-panelists going into this. We have Mulango EAE and Kristi Cates. Thank you so much, Team Cordkillers, for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
All right, is it just me, or would you guys like as much as I would to dive in and gossip about the summer movie draft?
Bring it.
I'm going to take that as it's just me, because Team Cordkillers is not tearing
it was
it
weird
up.
how they both turned their heads and were like,
Yeah, like, I guess if that's a thing we got to do.
It's kind of rude of you to make us, Brian, but
The torture continues.
Warcraft came out this weekend to a 24 million number.
The meh heard round the world.
Yep.
Except for in China, where apparently, I mean, this is one of those moments where it's like, if we didn't rely just on U.S. Domestic box office, you guys would be tearing it up, right? Because in China, it did really, really well.
Yep. If only we were Chinese.
All right, 40 million for The Conjuring, which goes to Team We Have Concerns. 22 million to Now You See Me Too, which is my Team DTNS movie.
By the way, how did that do per your expectations for opening weekend?
Oh, Now You See Me Too? I forgot I owned it, so it did great.
Well, specifically, it was one of, because keep in mind, DTNS and Night Attack are pretty much neck and neck, but you had three big movies. You had Free State of Jones, you had Now You See Me Too, Star Trek Beyond, and Suicide Squad. Come to our two movies remaining, Secret Life of Pets and Ghostbusters. In that context, are you pleased for how Now You See Me Too performed?
I'm more concerned with what it does next week. If it drops right off, I'll be a little concerned.
As far as its week-over-week performance? Okay.
But if it goes like from 22 to 15 million, and then it's like, oh, look, it's gonna have a little trail, then that might be okay. But honestly, it's more to me about what does Suicide Squad and Star Trek do versus Ghostbusters and Secret Life of Pets. Now, let's not forget our guests, Cordkillers here, also have big movies coming up. Independence Day Resurgence, June 24th. The Legend of Tarzan, July 1st, right along with the Purge election year the same weekend.
Wait. Before we get to that, Tom, you're being way too modest. Are you trying to tell me that you think that The Secret Life of Pets and Ghostbusters will stand any chance against Suicide Squad and Star Trek?
I've got to make up an extra 26 million as well. And yeah, I think Ghostbusters is being underrated, and the opinions about it are starting to build back to positive a little. That it's still yet to be determined how people feel on release day. Secret Life of Pets is going to do well.
I think that Star Trek Beyond is going to be surprisingly bad or do surprisingly poorly in its ticket sales, but I think Suicide Squad will be a surprise hit, possibly to the level of Guardians of the Galaxy, because it's roughly at the same time slot. It hits the same quirky notes, literally and figuratively, since it seems to want to borrow soundtracks from the exact same era. I don't know. If I was laying odds, I would put Team DTNS as the winner of this one.
I think Star Trek Beyond is my Achilles heel. I think Secret Life of Pets is your secret winner if it goes that way.
Maybe. I don't know. I just watched Zootopia again with the kids, and I don't see how Secret Life of Pets can be 1/3 as good as Zootopia, either in box office or in quality.
Yeah. I mean, the first Star Trek movie, unless my numbers, these numbers are probably wrong, but I think the first one pulled in roughly like shy of 200 million.
Yeah, just shy of 200 million. And I believe Into Darkness did, I want to say 170, but I'm probably wrong.
So.
Yeah. Congratulations, Tom Merritt.
Oh, please stop. You're jinxing me. Because that's how it works.
I'm actually wondering, have we ever thought about including all the box offices, not just doing domestic?
Well, it changes the game considerably, especially because you would have potentially release dates that were affected in the United States but not affected worldwide. You know, like there could be massive shifts in that regard. And plus, also, all the players are here in America, so we just tend to keep it simple.
I mean, mostly we just want to keep the movie draft great.
Okay, we're gonna build a wall between our movies and other movies.
No, but there really is, like, yes. Part of it is that the players are mostly North American, so U.S. release dates are easier for us to have some knowledge about. But the bigger problem would be, like, I'd be all for, like, yeah, let's do worldwide, but then it does get tricky about release dates because they can be wildly different worldwide.
Well,
and so
and also,
you think it's bad right now with movies moving around and, like, oh, you've got the last movie, so you're only going to get 4 weeks. It would be even like that 10 times for worldwide releases.
It also changes the games in terms of you can have a surprise hit for a quirky intellectual comedy in the United States because it could be the right message at the right time. But if you're going to do globally, because it's sort of like the way casinos run, you know, they only have a 1% margin in their favor, but because they're running a billion games at once, they come out ahead. It you know, globally, there's a reason we keep getting epic movies, you know, with big giant computer generated set pieces.
But see, that part just makes it more fun to me. If
really?
If the entire world always had the release dates on the same day, I'd be advocating for it. I'd be like, yeah, that's more random number generators in there, more things that more challenges. That sounds
well. I guess I take the reverse because the more random number generators you have, the more likely you get the regression to the mean because of this. It's like I like the more wild noise that happens in a single market.
Well, yeah, there is that. You know, in a smaller market, you're going to have more swings. That's just true. You're right.
Correct. Interesting.
Well, so Team Cordkillers has successfully evaded talking about their slam movies. Do you have anything to say?
I mean, I will be interested to see what Independence Day does.
Me too.
But I don't see us. I mean, we're definitely going to be in the middle of the pack this year. And I attribute that to, and I think it's good, the randomness of the draft and us having new people come in to, like, mess with the psyche of what was going on.
Well, one thing that you've always been good at, Mulango, and in fact, that's the reason that you joined us here in the fold, was you would always write these breakdowns of who's everyone's chances of winning. If you're going to handicap us now, what do you think? What's your assessment?
I mean, honestly, I think it's a 1-2 between you guys, but I do think Tom wins it. Just at the fact that the two movies that I think Suicide Squad will be a breakout. I don't think Star Trek will make as much money just based on the other two movies. The first one was just shy of that 2 million mark. So I think that definitely gives them a good bump. But I mean, it's just interesting that a lot of the, like, I call Tom's strategy the Walmart like window shopper.
Sure.
Which, and I think he played that card during the winter draft, and it worked out. And I think it was just the perfect storm for the summer draft, where he just got a lot of good movies at a low price.
Stock up while prices are low.
And see, this is what's fun to me about Team Cordkillers is Mulango is very much analytical in numbers, and I go with my gut, which, you know, doesn't always work so great, but it gives a balance to the team.
Yeah.
Looking at the movies that are left, I mean, I saw the trailer for Secret Life of Pets. I actually do think that might do pretty well. Maybe not better than Zootopia, but I think it might do better than you think. And then Star Trek, I was really looking forward to it, and I don't know, I saw a trailer and it's a little more tepid than I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a little something more in there, and something's missing. I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Yeah,
as far as our movies go, I think Independence Day might do better than you guys think. I really do. I think it's kind of one of those summer blockbustery things, and it might fall just at the right time.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. First of all, I do think Independence Day is going to do better than you expect. And number two, I do agree that for a third installment in a series, especially when the first two have generally been good, Star Trek Beyond does not feel like a triumphant third chapter in a trilogy. It feels like now it feels like we just jumped straight back to Star Trek Insurrection or whatever, you know, just another episode.
What are you trying to say about Star Trek Insurrection there?
It was not a very good movie. It was very boring.
I think it was better than Star Trek It's better than 5.
Case
It's definitely better than 5.
The defense rests.
All right, let's move along to our first spoil target, Warcraft. Now, Brian, you didn't see it, but you don't plan to see it, right?
Yeah, but I am familiar. I mean, trust me, I there's a good chance I played Warcraft before literally anyone else in this room, on the panel, and most of the people listening. So spoil away.
Yeah. This is a game movie for fans of the game that is also trying to be a mid-level, it's probably trying to be more than that, but I think succeeds in being a mid-level fantasy movie for fans of fantasy who aren't looking for a different, darker kind of fantasy, but a very classic fantasy story. That is what I got out of it. That's why I enjoyed it. I thought it did a great job of handling the world of Warcraft, not World of Warcraft, but that the lore very well. There were tons of subtle fan service things like the Murloc lurking under a bridge that made you laugh and say, oh, that's pretty cool. Apparently people who play Alliance, and I have some friends who do that, loved when the Eagle came into Stormwind at exactly through the same gate that you always did as a player. And so that makes it fun. And it's a sturdy story. I feel like the problems with it are that they are setting up so many things for future stories involving Arthas and the undead and the plague that to someone who doesn't know the world, it felt like they were going towards a conclusion and a battle and then suddenly threw a bunch of plot lines in that didn't get resolved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. It was fan service all the way. And I was somebody who played the first 3 games, and I mean, not to tie back into the movie draft, but there was this idea that everybody that played the games would just come out to see this movie, and I think that it ran up against a lot of the reviews that I was reading on Rotten Tomato. It ran up against that, where if you were not sure what this was, it wasn't something that was going to draw you out. I mean, I left the theater, and everybody that was around me, anybody who played the game seemed to love it. And it seemed like those were the only people that really showed up for the most part.
That kind of happened at my viewing too. I mean, we arrived at it, and it's at the great big Cinemark theater with the recliner chairs and the cup holders and all the fancy stuff. And I thought, oh, it's going to be packed. And we walked in, and literally it was 15 minutes before the movie was to start, and there was no one in there. And I think by the time it started, there were maybe 15 or 20 people in there. Walking out afterwards, there was a one pack of people on the sidewalk, really talking about it really enthusiastically and picking over the plot points and what they saw. And other than that, I don't know. I almost feel like placing it where they did too at this time of the summer, people have to make choices budget-wise. And if they haven't really heard of it or they don't play the game and they don't care, they're not going to even go check it out as, oh, that looks like a cool fantasy movie. Mm-hmm. There's so many other things going on that I think that kind of knocked it down a peg, maybe, in part. I don't know.
One of the things that surprised me is that they went for the epic high fantasy thing of a fairly saturated market, telling a kind of an also-ran story that, yes, it does have a background, but the games have always been wonderful from the very first Warcraft game. If you overpoked one of the orcs, it would say, "Stop poking me." It was always self-aware and very meta. And I know that in World of Warcraft, there was expansion missions you could go on as a goblin where essentially you were doing a beer run. Like they talked around it, but it was a fraternity doing a beer run or whatever. I'm surprised that they didn't go for something quirkier in the movie. And again, this is coming from somebody who didn't see it. But was there enough nods? Or, like, personally, I would have loved to have seen, a frat boy drama about getting the crusty old dean with a bunch of goblins, show me a classic 1970s Animal House style story that happens to have goblins. And I
Fast
think
Times at Goldshire High.
Yes, all of that, right? I think that would have attracted more people where you sort of set it up just by saying, yeah, there's this thing called Warcraft. You don't need to know anything about it. It's just a silly movie about goblins trying to get a crusty old dean. Like, would that have worked, or do you feel like they made the right play for where they
no
are.
idea if goblins trying to get a crusty old dean would have worked or not. It's a little far afield
No,
to make an evaluation of. But I get what you're saying, and I'm curious what Mulango and Kristi think about, because there were some funny bits. There were some definite nods and winks in that spirit that Brian's talking about.
I mean, one of the soldiers gets turned into a sheep. That's freaking hilarious.
And there's a cooldown on it.
I definitely think this movie should have been made like 8 years ago. I think it would have been a completely different story where everybody would have been like, this is amazing. I also, I don't know, like the thing is they're going to make more of these because it's doing so well overseas. So I know that they were trying to tailor it to this Lord of the Rings type comparison where like it's going to be a trilogy. And as somebody who I left the movie, I liked it. I don't know if that's the demographic they want because obviously it's not getting a big showing. But
I think the way they did
all of them.
I think the way they did the story, it almost, the way they left it, it almost has to be a trilogy, not only because of the ending, but also because there were so many things left out. I mean, we saw the Draenei for like 5 minutes. We didn't see any gnomes. It's like there's so much stuff in rich parts of the game that I didn't see in the movie that I wanted to see. And I almost, I don't know if that's simply for fans of the game as well, or if that's something that as they expand that universe out and add more content to it and all the different characters to it and more Horde and more Alliance, that it'll appeal to maybe a wider range of people once the word gets around about it. I'm not sure.
Well, I think the blessing and the curse of Duncan Jones as the director is that you end up with a movie that anyone bringing, like Kristi, you made me laugh when you're like, I haven't been playing Warcraft very long, only 4 years. Like, that's a lot. And you bring in enough lore with you just from that to be like, okay, I know who a lot of these people are. Duncan Jones knows that too. And that makes a really rich experience. But if you come in without that, you just see big dumb orcs and classic fantasy humans, right?
Yeah, I suppose that's correct. The thing for me, and maybe I have to set that aside as far as what I already know from the game, because to me, the characters from, the king and queen to the way they had the different levels of orcs, like the kind of, the more progressive orcs wanting to fix things and the evil orcs and this whole, I know there's a huge backstory to Warcraft that actually involves books and books of Azeroth and its backstory. But setting that aside, I guess if I came at the movie from a point of view of not having seen any of the Warcraft stuff, it would probably just look like a random fantasy movie. But is that a bad thing? Haven't other movies been just random fantasy movies that you went and saw and ended up really liking?
Yeah. Mulango, you were starting to say something. I cut you off. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think Kristi kind of like alluded to the answer to this, but it was just interesting because I was going to ask you guys as a group, like, what compares this to Lord of the Rings or even Harry Potter? Is it just the fact that there's such a big following behind the books and this just plays to the whole video games translating to movies just doesn't work or has not broken the code yet to figure that out?
I think you are correct in that, we were talking and marveling on the Weird Things podcast about not only has there have been financially successful movies that were based on video games, but artistically, like the highest rated artistically, the highest thumbs up, most beloved video game movie is Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within with 44% positive ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. Like just for some reason, no video game has become a movie and succeeded artistically.
And you look at the Rotten Tomatoes and you see that very low critical rating, but you see that very high fan rating. The last time I looked, it was 86%. I don't know where it is today. And to me, there's also a little bit of a Pacific Rim effect here, which is to say the critics look at it and say, well, there's loads of plot holes and it's weird and the acting is a little stiff here and there for Pacific Rim and give it a low rating. But all of the people like me who are like, I just want to see, kaiju and Jaegers fight. And I got that and I'm excited, gave it a higher rating. I think Warcraft is a similar, not exact parallel, but the critics are looking at it and saying, yeah, it's not, the story didn't give me anything extra. It's a little confusing. There's too many unresolved threads. I'm going to give it a lower rating. Whereas fans who came in and said, I want to see this Warcraft that I knew from Orcs versus Humans or Warcraft 3 come to life. And I did. And it was well done.
But see, I guess what I was thinking of is not even so much what Brian was talking about, where video games successfully made into movies or not, but just if you walked into that movie and you didn't even know that Warcraft was a video game, for instance, what about movies like Neverending Story or Willow or Dark Crystal or Labyrinth? Those were just fantasy movies that just came out, and they were great movies. So why is it that Warcraft isn't allowed to stand on its own as a fantasy movie? Is it because of all the tie-ins to the video game, so people have all these preconceived notions of it?
By the way, you forgot to mention Legend in there with
Legend,
Tom Cruise.
yeah, Legend.
Yeah, that's
no, I think you're absolutely right. I'm curious if this story has all its names changed and is put out under the name, Fantasy Battle. like how does it do then if people aren't saying, because I bet there's a lot of people who said, oh, Warcraft, that's that thing the nerds play.
Exactly.
I'm not going to go see that movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's possible. Exactly. I have no idea. I was just looking up Pacific Rim real quick. Pacific Rim opened up to 37 million, and that is one of my favorite movies. Compared to Warcraft, I mean, that's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, that is. All right, any more thoughts on Warcraft?
None.
All right, let's move on to Voltron, Legendary Defender. Brian, I'll just get it out there right now. I got bored.
That's fine. That's fine.
Oh.
Don't care. You're not my daughter.
I am not saying that to in any way try to sway you or tell you shouldn't enjoy it, because apparently I'm wrong. I loved the Voltron series, watched it a ton. I'm not an expert on it, but as soon as this came up, I'm like, same style. That's Hunk. That I knew who these people were as soon as they showed up on screen. And after 20 minutes, I'm like, Are we getting anywhere yet? I just felt like it dragged for me.
That's amazing, because I like, and I guess we'll largely just talk about the first episode. There are certain things that have to happen. They have to find all 5 lions. They have to get there. And what I loved is every moment you're all like, man, are they really going to do this over the top, cheesy montage sequence? And then it's like somebody says something exactly expressing that thought at that time. That was one of the things I loved the most. Did you notice that he wasn't much in the first episode? He only showed up and had a couple of lines, but the red-haired sergeant at arms was played by Rhys Darby, who played Murray, the manager in Flight of the Conchords.
I knew I recognized the voice, but I didn't realize I knew he was a Kiwi, but I didn't recognize him as Murray.
Yeah, no, I thought he was great, and he only gets better in the next episode. And it's like there's that brief moment they do form Voltron in the first episode, but then
that's Hank, right? The guy Hank Ventures, the guy who does Hank Ventures' voice. That's he does Lance, right?
Oh, is that who that is? Because
Lance, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
I totally believe you. I know. I thought for sure it was the same guy, because he's playing the same archetype as Sokka in Avatar: The Last Airbender. But it's apparently a different actor. Just like Hunk is definitely playing Bolin from Korra. Dude, I loved it. And every moment it gets on that teetering edge of cheesiness, somebody says something ironically that just exactly lets me know that they're in on the joke too.
Well, the one I liked is when they say, like, we can't possibly break in there, and then they immediately start figuring out how to break in, and one of them says, wait, I thought you just said it would be impossible to break in there.
Yes. And there's great, especially the second episode, there's these great moments they play with the convention where they're all like, hey man, we don't know how we did it, but we got to form Voltron again. So the 5 of them all get in their alliance. They're like, let's just run around and do Voltron stuff. And they go, and then the screen splits into 5 chunks, and they're all like, yeah. And then the next time they're like, yeah. And they're going left to right. And the third time they're like, yeah. And then finally, just of the 5 chunks, only one comes up, and it's Hunk going like, hey, am I the only one still pretending to be excited? And then, I mean, it's like there's so many great moments. I think the comedy pacing is wonderful. I'm having a blast, and it's like, it's not often that my daughter, and again, I'm watching this in daughter vision, which changes everything, but it's not often that Penny will hold off on cartoons just to watch them with me, but this is definitely one of those cases. Having a great time. And again, Reese Darby just gets funnier and funnier moving forward.
Brian, compared to The Last Airbender, and this might be an unfair comparison, where do you rank that Voltron?
I'm not far enough in to tell it to say one's better than the other, but I think, gosh, I feel terrible saying this. I think it might be better than The Legend of Korra, because Legend of Korra had the advantage of being a world that we were familiar with and an advanced version of it. This is a brand new world with science fiction conventions instead. But I know 3 episodes in, I'm laughing and I'm getting the characters faster than ever. So I'm going to say probably below Avatar ultimately, but certainly stronger than the first 3 episodes of Korra.
And by the way, Lance is definitely not the same voice as Hank Fetcher. It just sounded that way to me.
Yeah. Well, like I told you, man, I thought he was Sokka.
He's Jeremy Shada, whoever that is. So yeah, I will probably, just out of love of Brian and the original Voltron, give the second episode a chance, because part of it may have been that supersized length of this first episode, and being so similar to the original. Part of me may have just been saying, I'd just rather watch the original. I don't know. So I want to see it in its like natural format and see if that changes anything for me.
Yeah. Bryce, did you have any thoughts? Were you familiar with the original Voltron?
No, I wasn't. I watched it for On the Lookout on Cordkillers this week. I thought it was really nice. I do agree with Tom, thinking back on it, that it could have been shorter, but also I can tell it was very clearly 3 episodes stitched together. And so there was a moment where they were getting the yellow and the green tigers, where I was like, okay, they're gonna get them. So
right. They did kind of do that, where it's just like, yeah, they got it. It was no problem.
Yeah.
And the rest, let's go.
But I thought it was really nice. There was a point where I was watching it because I knew it was from the Korra and the Avatar team, but I almost thought it was from the same team who made Totally Spies. It looks a lot like Totally Spies.
Interesting.
Which is a Canadian sort of similar thing. But I did enjoy it. I'll probably check out a couple more episodes. Yeah.
Right on.
All right, let's move on to Preacher. Depending on how you count them, episodes 2 and 3, they're certainly the second and third episodes of the season, although Sling TV and apparently AMC's On Demand call them Pilot Episode 1 and Episode 2, just to confuse the heck out of us. I have only seen the first and second episodes of the season, which I would call 101 and 102, which is also called Pilot in Episode 1. But Brian, you've seen all 3 that have been out now.
Yeah, the one we watched last night. I'll try to be spoiler light as we discuss them, but hot
and we
dog.
haven't discussed the second episode of the season yet, so we can talk about both of them.
Sure. You know what? I'm gonna let you drive them because I don't want to accidentally talk in the wrong direction.
I've been drinking, Brian. I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
No, I actually haven't been drinking. I just have to remember what happens. In the second episode, it's when it's settled down and it becomes very clear that Cassidy is a vampire.
It's also second episode is also where Preacher gets his power, right?
Yeah, Preacher he kind of gets it at the end of the pilot. He doesn't he doesn't realize it until the guy pulls his heart out.
Right,
and
but
he's
then
like, wait, I must have done that. So he starts trying to use it in the second episode, and the 2 investigators show up, and Cassidy takes care of him.
Correct.
Yes.
Or does he?
Or does he? Because that's right. At the very end of that episode, we see them walking around again.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There is I don't think this is a spoiler, but in the third episode, there's a delightful, very, very brief scene where clearly we join in progress as Preacher and Cassidy are testing out his newfound ability, and Preacher is telling Cassidy to do a whole bunch of stuff, some of which Cassidy knows how to do, some of which he doesn't know how to do, but he's feels compelled to do his best guess based on because he has to do it or whatever. The third episode, we got the a little more insight from our 2 mysterious local cartoon clothing wearing investigators. I gotta tell you, man, I'm loving it. I'm loving it, and the chick who plays Tulip is wonderful. She's wonderful. The character's wonderful. Everything about the show is great, and I get. Keep in mind, this comes from somebody who has not read the comic. But if I watch this show and then read a comic of it, I would assume that everything I've seen so far is like, yeah, you could never make that into a show. So I'm just hoping they've nailed it across the board. By the way, second episode, did you know was directed by Seth Rogen? Did you know that?
Oh no, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So anyway, really, really good stuff. Can't say anything but awesome stuff.
Ruth Negga plays Tulip. She's also Lady something or other Tarja, I think, in Warcraft, alongside Dominic Cooper's King Lane. So that's kind of funny to see them together in both of these things. And I agree, she's fantastic. I did catch enough of the third episode to see her little conversation right at the beginning, and she's just so good at pulling off that Tulip attitude.
Yeah, when you say conversation, you're talking about her conversation with the Texas Highway.
No, it's with the lady on the bench who's telling her how she wants her husband to be killed, and then Tulip says, like, "I'm not going to kill your husband. No, let's move on to what we're here to talk about."
Yes. I'll tell you what, it's the little things in production that they got right, because people from Texas know what font is used on the Texas Highway Patrol, and it's like we know what the font of our driver's or license plate looks like, and they're getting all that stuff right. It's delightful. It's disgusting. It's horrific. It's bloody. It's over the top. My kids have to be in bed before we dare to turn it on, and I'm loving every second of it.
Yeah, who's the girl with the? The parts that look to me like a comic book are like Arseface. The kid with the
is that what they call him?
And then who's the girl with the dented in skull?
Yeah,
where it's like
I don't know her name.
Yeah,
the one who he tells her to open her eyes, and
she opens her eyes. Yeah. I find the show compelling.
Yeah,
that's the best word I could say for it. Like in so many different ways. The characters are interesting. The situations make no sense, but they're still like I can't turn away.
Yes.
Character development is definitely, I give it a plus for the 2 episodes that I watched. And I think the crazy Cassidy character and Tulip are probably the reasons why I stuck around for season 2. Well, plus, like I said, the characters are really good. It's an interesting take on stuff.
Well, yeah, and you it's one of those great things where you never know quite who's the good guy and the bad guy. Which is the modern way. But like Cassidy in the first episode, I was sure was a villain. And he's certainly not a good guy. But by end of episode 2, you're like, oh, no, he's definitely on Jesse's side.
He might be my favorite madcap second in command wacky sidekick. Like, totally. I mean, top 5 of all time, I'm thinking. Like, he's just filled with this joyous energy. And again, as you see it, it's like just the scene you're going to see where Preacher's like trying out saying all these things, and he's doing it, and it's like they're not great things. And he's like, this is amazing. He's just fit. It's as though Deadpool was his second in command. It's amazing.
Yeah. All right. Anything more, Brian, about Preacher?
No, although I did, real quick, just as a side note, I forgot to mention that I continued to watch Daredevil, and we'll talk about it more, but man, oh man, every second the Punisher and Kingpin is on screen, I'm in love. Every second Elektra's on there, I just want to turn it off and go to sleep. And I don't know if that's saying anything about like secret misogyny deep within my soul, or if the hand, mystical, magical tour subplot just doesn't resonate with me. I don't know.
Interesting. Well, we're going to let Kristi and Mulango out before Game of Thrones is Justified, so we don't spoil the rest of your evenings. But thank you guys both.
Thank you.
Remind folks again, Kristi Cates, where people can find you.
KristiCates.com. It's KristiKates. I'm Kristi Cates on Twitter. Monday Music News on Mondays at 6 p.m. on DiamondClub.tv. And I have some music stuff on the way in July. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. And Mulango, where can people find more of you?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at MulangoAE. That's MulangoAE. And also check out the new podcast that I started with a friend of mine. It's called Movie Jam, and we basically just make fun of movies in a very weird way. So I'll leave that.
Excellent.
At that.
Mulango After Earth. Mulango AE.
There you go.
That's how you remember it.
Right on. Good seeing you guys. Thanks for
All
coming
right.
by.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so let's move on to Game of Thrones, episode 8, season 6. We're nearing the end of the season, Brian, and this was the most boring Game of Thrones episode yet.
Doggone it. I mean, there were parts of it that I absolutely adored. Let's start with all the good stuff.
All right. Yeah, and there were a couple really good things here.
Seeing Brienne, or Brienne as they pronounce it on the show, seeing Brienne try her hand at diplomacy was delightful. There's some delightful schadenfreude / that weird twist, that moment that you realize that despite all odds, the one person you knew for sure you would never ever find redeemable whatsoever, you find rooting for in Cersei. Like, I derive so much pleasure watching zombie Darth Mountain destroy, that one person. That was amazing. It was also a delightful moment of levity when everybody's, drinking wine and swapping jokes, and Grey Worm is finally relaxing, cutting loose for all of 5 seconds before they come under attack.
Cutting down his hair?
Yeah, right? Those were genuinely great moments. And seeing the Hound, Sandor Clegane, interacting with the
Brotherhood,
the Brotherhood, the followers of the Red God. That was great of them arguing about how many of them he gets to kill and how much he gets to torture them and so on. And that moment that Blackfish just realizes how screwed he is. Like, the moment he's like, no, don't let him in. And they're like, he's the one who owns the castle. He's
Sorry,
my
boss.
lord. My lord. And then
he's our lord, my lord. I thought that was a great way of constructing that line.
It was really, really good in that regard. The only thing, in fact, I'm going to say almost all of this episode was really, really good, except for, I think the parts that are weak are so weak, it kind of breaks the episode. And in this case, we did see advancement over in the East. We did see advancement with Sandor Clegane. We did see advancement with, or at least some form of answer about whether or not they were going to get bodies helping out with the reclaiming Winterfell.
I mean, but did we? Like, we saw Sandor Clegane meet up with the Brotherhood and eat some not chicken.
Yeah.
We saw an attack, and Khaleesi shows up at the end and doesn't even have a line.
That part was genuinely awful. That part suddenly felt like a $20 TV novella, cheap soap opera. That was awful. That was legitimately awful. So bad they shouldn't have even done it. They should have just...
Because my problem with this episode is, like, yes, Tyrion sitting around, trying to get jokes is lovely. Sandor's, like, bargaining for the killing and the hanging, lovely. If there was more going on in this episode. But none of those things moved us anywhere. And I think I wouldn't mind if I got a lot of movement somewhere else. And I guess, yes, we do get Jaime actually taking over River Run. So there is movement there. But what that was about was Sansa needs an army to help Jon retake Winterfell. And we got no progress there.
Well,
like, we ended up with a net zero. They actually got a reversal in that case. So that, how are they going to take Winterfell's story is now still hanging out there. I don't know, but it's not interesting me that I'm like, I want them to get the army and go to the battle, which we're going to get next week, apparently, anyway, somehow.
Everything you said.
What we got in Marine was like, yes, I want to see Khaleesi return. And they like, here, she returned. So we literally gave you what you wanted.
Here's the thing is, I suspect that you're 100% right on everything you said. I suspect all of those things have been like, they probably wouldn't have tasted so foul had we not poured the MSG of the faceless, faceless elephant in the room, which is, they totally dropped the ball on that whole plot line. What a waste. What a waste. This is what we did with Arya we got her trained up. You had two options. Either she makes it, either tie it back to hey, MFer, you said 3 names, and I believe the third one was Jake and Hagar. Stab you, I steal your secrets, I'm going to go avenge everything. Or you get Jake and Hagar saying, hey, you passed the last test. I know you're out for vengeance. You go get that vengeance, Arya Stark. But instead, we got this mushy middle, do-nothing waste of our time where she says, oh, I'm Arya. Yeah, good day, governor. And I'm going back to Winterfell. And then and he just gives the nod. What a waste. What a waste.
Well,
dumb.
It's not the part that disappoints me so much is that we spent a lot of time with Arya learning from Jaqen Hagar. What did she learn? Like, apparently she learned how to fight in the dark, although I don't remember exactly how that came about. I know she was blindfolded at some point, but I don't remember her actually getting better at it.
She was getting decent enough at it, but the problem was...
But that's what this entire thing hinges on, is her luring the waif into the darkness so that she can beat her up. I'm not convinced.
Especially because while she was blind, she never beat the waif.
Right.
So going back to being blind, although you could say, well, the waif was sighted during all this time or whatever.
Well, okay. Sure.
And so maybe, but I don't know. Maybe it seems like if you're going to tell in a story in a visual medium, maybe you'd train the audience to get
and she
excited
went
for
so
that moment.
far down the road of like, I'm a girl with no name. I'm a girl with no name. For him to go, finally, you a girl is no one, and her go, nope, psych. I actually am someone. And so I don't know what we were supposed to get out of this. I don't feel. I think we're supposed to get that she's learned these secrets, but I don't know what they are. Well, I guess she learned how to fight in the dark, but I'm sort of unconvinced of that. And it feels like last week's episode where she was running away and almost got it, and the waif stabbed her, and then she goes back and she gets healed just for the waif. Like, it just felt like a repeat. Like, we did all that so that she could get hunted down. Like, why didn't we just see the waif hunting her down in the first place? I don't understand why we had to do that little turnabout and see the actor in the play get killed, because that doesn't add anything at all.
Yes, everything you're saying is 100% correct, and all I want to do is literally repeat everything you just said for the last 3 minutes. I mean, it's but we can't. Suffice to say, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bryce.
I feel like maybe I have a little bit of a counterpoint.
All right, please,
like,
yes, do.
When I think of Arya, she is a child. It's been so long since she got to Essos Bravos, that I kind of don't remember exactly where her trajectory was right before it. But I think of Arya now as a trained fighter who previously she was trying to learn how to be a better fighter, and now she is going to be skilled enough where she can join the other Starks in some capacity.
I mean, yes, that's a side effect, but I don't feel like I mean, in terms of, we can have that. You're right. That is an important piece of the puzzle that will matter going forward. But there's so many ways we could give her that piece of the puzzle.
Show her being able to learn how to look like other people.
Or how about this? Why don't you, instead of relying on cutting out the dark, which is something that, my guess is the waif knows how to fight in the dark since they're the ones who made her blind to teach her a lesson. Why not have her do something that other people don't know how to do? What if she adopts the water dancer stance holding needle? That's something she learned outside of. Why doesn't she warg into the vision of a bat so she can see at night? That's a Stark thing that she has going for us.
Bryce, I think you're right, but I'd be more on the side of accepting that as like, yes, she is finally going to go back and rejoin the Starks, and that's great. Except they make a big deal of her being healed by the actor who asked her, what are you going to do? And she says, no one's ever seen what's beyond Westeros. Like,
yeah, that was
why?
That
why?
was dumb.
Why are you it's
Well, and that's what it was. There was a lot of threads that were set up, all of which were totally irrelevant and totally shut up. There was one delightful moment as she's walking around injured, and there's that brief moment that we paused it because the dogs are barking or whatever, and I say to Bonnie, like, you're like, man, that would be just an insanely cruel thing to have her stick around for 6-7 seasons and get a whole story and then just kill her off. And then there's this pause. We're like, also seems like something George R. R. Martin might do. I mean, it's like there.
Yeah.
I love the fact that there's, it's plausible that a character who we've loved that long might end up dying. But whatever.
Also, a little weird that Beric Dondarrion just says like, "Oh, no, we caught these three. I don't know what they were doing. We're killing them. Also, I'm back," which means no Lady Stoneheart. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no Lady Stoneheart. Also, don't look up Lady Stoneheart if you're not familiar.
If you don't
with
want to
the
be
story.
spoiled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? I mean, I'm probably overdoing it in my feigned anger because this episode's still better than most episodes in most other shows. But I think you nailed it, Brian, too, earlier. Or you were alluding that we've had such a good season that my expectations got high enough that I'm like, what? An average episode? I'm incensed.
Well,
how dare you?
When Game of Thrones is good, it's very, very good, and it takes us to another place, and we feel this sense of achievement. When Game of Thrones is bad, I'm using air quotes, it makes us angry at the cruel, heartless, random nature of life. Very rarely is Game of Thrones, do they do something useless? And that was the big surprise, was that there was a third of this episode, and by virtue of that, maybe if you want to go back and do a full audit, maybe as much as 40 to 50 minutes, it turns out to be wasted nonsense horseshit. I mean, it's like that is not a crime Game of Thrones often commits, and it definitely did it last night. I just don't see any way to salvage or to tell me somehow it was important that she needed to go and have a nod fest with Jake and Hagar and then head on out. I don't. Yeah. It very rarely does it waste our time, and it really, really did this time.
All right, let's move on to Justified, episode 9, season 2, in which Lothar of the Hill People agrees to sell the mountain and mine it for coal. That's not too far off what happens. It's called Brother's Keeper. This is definitely where the show is starting to feel like a study in Appalachian peoples, right? And Margot Martindale's just killing it. She's amazing. I feel like I've lost the thread of what Justified was, where I'm like, oh, it's Raylan Givens and Boyd Crowder and their families fight over the centuries playing out in modern times. And this has become way more complicated in a cool way, though, and involving Raylan and Boyd just as partial players in a much larger canvas that involves what's Margot's apple pie name?
Mags.
Mags involves Mags and her whole family, and now the realization that daughter's father is definitely dead. Not only does she know it, but now the cops know it too. And the canvas upon which this story is written just seems to get wider and wider and wider, especially considering like Raylan's boss still suspects that he stole some money out of evidence, right? When's that shoe going to drop? There's lots of shoes hanging up in the air here.
Well, and this is why I now understand everybody was so hot for us to watch this after The Shield, because The Shield, of course, set up 3 balls and just left them hanging in the air for 7 seasons long, right? And now we're feeling the same thing. Everything that we've had up until this point is still there, but it doesn't change the fact that day after day, he's got to go to work and solve the next murder. And meanwhile, there's just more vectors, more balls in the air. I think that they've done a great job of portraying the little girl as somebody who is a realist, who's dealing with what she has. Man, I don't know. It affected me deeply, this episode. Just because in the same way that, like, The Last of Us, the video game, affected me, in that I just really am feeling for this young girl trying to figure out what to do absent any opportunities,
Yeah. I mean, if you show me this episode without showing me anything else, then I feel like, oh, this is the story of a corrupt Hill family and a girl's fight to get out with the help of a U.S. Marshal, right? Like that could be an entire series right there.
Right. Yeah, and it would be good. Oh, by the way, over under, if we're flipping a coin right now, if we're placing a side bet, did Raylan have sex with that chick from the coal mine?
No, because she made a remark about would have been fun though.
Oh,
And
okay.
And
okay.
he's like, would have been? I don't know, maybe. I said maybe. I think that's all he said.
Oh, that okay. That you're right.
He said maybe, but it wouldn't have been justified. I think that's what he said.
God damn it. All right. Anyway, yes, continuing to love it. Continue to love seeing the evolving, nuanced character of Boyd Crowder. There was a brief while where I felt like Boyd just wanted to do right. And now
I mean, Boyd always just wants to do right. His route to right, though, often takes wide detours through other places.
He certainly has a very specific. He seems to feel that doing right involves getting a seat at the highest stakes poker game in the Tri-County area. You know,
because how else is he going to protect Ava? Let's just be real.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I love the fact that the love triangle is possibly shifting away from Ava. I like the idea that the time Raylan spent with Ava is just, kind of a fling for a little bit, and then that's sort of in the past now.
Yeah, it feels real too. It doesn't feel like they forgot the story. It just feels like that's what happens in towns like that. So yeah,
sure.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you feel well and truly spoiled. We will continue next week with Game of Thrones Justified and more. You can find us all the time at cordkillers.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.